Guys, Josh here with Casual J Media, and today we're taking a look at the Motorola G Power's front-facing selfie camera. This is 1080p, 30 frames per second, and if you don't know about this phone, it came out in 2020 this year, and the previous model was the Motorola G7 Power. But this model has a 16 megapixel front-facing camera, and we're just going to do some video tests. Right now we're testing the selfie vlogging camera, doing a video test, 1080p, 30 frames per second. We're going to try walking and see how stable it is. This is a mid-range phone, kind of a budget phone. I recently had gotten rid of my Galaxy Note 10 Plus that I had, and I went with something a little more affordable, so I have the Motorola G Power. So far I'm pretty happy with it. The cameras aren't as good, obviously, but this phone is a fraction of the price of the Note 10 Plus. So this is 1080p, 30 frames per second. The front-facing camera. In a minute we're going to switch to the rear camera. We're going to do 1080p and 4K, and we're also going to turn the stabilization on and off, and also try a 60 frames per second mode. But for vlogging, this phone will get you by in a pinch. I think this footage is pretty decent. Let me know what you think. Alright guys, so this is the rear-facing camera on the Motorola G Power. We are currently filming Full HD, 1080p, 30 frames per second, and we do have the onboard stabilization turned on, and I believe it achieves that just with software. But I did notice that if you're driving and you're using this mode, the phone tends to kind of overcompensate and your image gets a little bit jittery. But right now, at least from the screen that I'm looking at, it looks pretty smooth. Like I said, that is 30 frames per second, and it looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and stop and pan. I tend to prefer the 60 frames per second at 1080p. This phone also does shoot 4K, so in a minute we're going to check out the 4K footage. Let's go ahead and go to 1080p, 30 frames without the stabilization. Okay, so stabilization is turned off. Let's try walking again. As you can tell, it's not quite as smooth. It seems like the frames are a little higher. I don't think they are, but maybe it's just, maybe it's just me. But 1080p 30 frames, stabilization turned off. Now let's do 1080p 60 frames. This is my preferred method, and when you're doing 60 frames, you do not get the onboard stabilization. Alright, here we go, 1080p 60 frames. I think I tend to like this a little bit more. I don't know, maybe when I'm editing I'll see a big difference, but this seems a little smoother to me. I'm just used to filming in 60 frames per second. Most of my videos are in 60 frames, but they've got some construction going on over here, building some new houses. Alright, and next we're going to try the 4K setting. So this phone can shoot in 4K. Honestly, it's not that great. I mean, it is definitely clearer, but I think the phone's best settings are going to be 1080p, 30 frames, and the stabilization active, as far as getting the smoothest experience. But let's go ahead and try it. Alright guys, so this is 4K, 30 frames per second. It does not do 60 frames, unfortunately, and there is no onboard stabilization at 4K. But it does seem pretty clear. Everything looks a lot more crisp. Let's try the zoom. It's actually not too bad. It's not great. That's just digital zoom is all. So that is the 4K camera and video settings. Alright guys, so if I didn't mention it earlier, the rear-facing camera on this phone is a 16 megapixel. It does 1080p and 4K as well. It also has an 8 megapixel ultra-wide camera, which is going to be something like, I don't know, an action cam. Gives you a little bit more of a wider perspective. Not quite like a fish eyeball lens or anything like that, but it does definitely give you a lot more of a wider perspective. Just so we can test that, I'm going to go back to standard mode. Okay, so this is standard mode. It looks pretty, normal. And then I'm going to switch to ultra-wide mode. Okay, so I have not moved, and this is ultra-wide mode, so it really zooms out and gives you some pretty good field of view. honestly. Now there is a step down in quality, but it's not that bad, I don't think. It's just not as clear. You got a little bit of a fuzziness to the picture and the quality of the video. But another cool thing this phone has is a macro camera. So let's go ahead and try that out. And I believe you can even use it in video. Alright, so we are testing out the macro video camera. Let's see if we can get it to focus here. So there we go. I am right on that rock. It's pretty crazy. I'm actually touching the rock with the case of my phone. Look at that. That is pretty cool. The macro camera on this is actually only 2 megapixels. So, man, it looks like you need glasses. Check that out. It will automatically switch out of macro mode, I believe, or if you get really close to an object and it tries to focus, it will switch to macro mode for you. Alright guys, so this is the rear-facing camera, 4K, 30 frames per second. I can't see, what the screen is showing, so hopefully I'm in frame, but this is 4K, 30 frames per second. Let me know how it looks. I don't know, I'm torn between the 1080p 30 with onboard stabilization, and I'm torn between that and the 60 frames per second 1080p. But let me know what you think. And once again, this is a budget device, a mid-range device. So the fact that it has a 16 megapixel camera on the back, an 8 megapixel ultra wide, and a 2 megapixel macro, as well as a 16 megapixel on the front facing camera is pretty impressive for a device that's less than $250. Anyways guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Just a quick test of the video camera and the settings on the Motorola G Power. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button and subscribe, and we will see you on the next one. And let me know if you want to see any more videos on the Motorola G Power. I've had it for about 3 weeks now. I'm really enjoying the phone, but let me know in the comments. Thanks.